Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Delmar Larson. I'm a professor of chemistry at the University of California, Davis. I'm also the founder and director of the LibreTexts project. This introduction to the LibreVerse is my first foray in Open Ed Week this week. As I understand it, we have over 20 different presentations planned, and several of them have already happened already. And I am, again, very excited in order to be able to talk about the LibreVerse that's out there. We have a gaggle of people here. I'm not sure if gaggle or flock or merger is the appropriate uh, group here. Feel free to chime in with any questions. This is relatively informal. I'll make sure that the chat is open on my other screen. It's easier in order to address questions as they pop up rather than having to remember them near the end of this meeting. So let's get things going here. Um, The first thing, which is useful in order to be able to get down, is if you want to get an account in order to capitalize on the LibreVerse, you can do so at this email address, https register@libretext.org. Hopefully, Justin or Jennifer can actually paste that into the chat. For those of you that have access, this should be relatively straightforward. But the Libre1 account that you're asking for gives you the full access to the LibreVerse. Uh, Before jumping into the LibreVerse, I want to mention at least one of the initiatives that we started at least a few weeks ago, which is our LibreText Academy. And this is our professional development arm in order to capitalize on professional development for the greater LibreVerse that we are discussing. So what exactly is the LibreVerse? Well, for those of you that are familiar with the LibreText project, it's been around for about 17 years. It was born out of a precursor project called the ChemWiki. It was born in 2007, 2008 when I was an assistant professor. And the intent that I had was to create an infrastructure in order to take the place of the commercial textbook. Because the commercial textbook for my general chemistry class and for my instrumental analysis class were unbelievably expensive, ranging between $200 to $300 per physical book. And I felt that that was somewhat outrageous. I had the standard hubris that's associated with assistant professors trying to take on the world at that time. So the outcome of that was the ChemWiki that then evolved into the LibreText. The goal of that project was to focus primarily on chemistry classes, and especially the classes that I was focusing on. I mentioned general chemistry, I mentioned instrumental analysis, some physical chemistry, and other things like that. But it grew quite steadily over the last 17 years to not just address those topics of chemistry, but to all of chemistry, even to things that I'm less comfortable with, like organic chemistry and some aspects um, of analytical chemistry, and start to expand into a range of other components. So the when we started to expand the scope of our effort from just textbook related material into other aspects that we wanted to be able to focus, we just rebranded what we are building this open courseware as the LibreVerse. Uh, and this was something similar to how Marvel rebranded the MCU into the multiverse the last few years because I was a big comic book fan when I was younger. So if you were to go to this URL, launchpad.libretext.org, it is a map of the LibreVerse. And the goal of the LibreVerse is to generate an infrastructure that take the place of commercial publishers. And commercial publishers come into the classroom and they provide faculty with a set of golden handcuffs. And those golden handcuffs provides the faculty with the textbook, provides it with the homework, provides it with ancillary materials like the slide deck or question banks, provide it with AI nowadays, provide it with interactive materials, adaptive learning, and lots of other things like that. And if we want to extricate the commercial publishers from the classroom, we need to be able to mirror what commercial publishers provide faculty, which means here are the textbooks that you may want. Here's the homework system. Here's the ancillary materials. Here's the AI. Here's the interactive components off of that. So in other words, instead of focusing on a very narrow aspect of trying to build textbooks for a specific class or a series of classes, we are doing something far more expansive, which also requires a lot more effort, both financial and otherwise, in order to be able to advance that. And the LibreVerse is the state of our infrastructure. So the Launchpad, when you actually go to that URL, you'll see two big classifications. One is our libraries. We have 16 independent libraries. Of those 16 libraries, the chemistry is the most mature because it's the best subject that people should be studying, of course. But nonetheless, there are other libraries out there dealing with other aspects, including business, biology, math, health, and etc. We have 3 libraries that are not focusing specifically on a specific field or class of fields, but focusing on languages, specifically the Ukrainskia library and the Espanol library. It's a library that hosts content that's in a different language, not for the study of Ukrainian or Spanish, but for the study of chemistry for native Spanish speakers or native Ukrainian speakers. We have a third library, it's our global library. That right there is our hodgepodge of different languages that we have put together. Much of the content on those 3 languages were constructed via machine translation, generating lots of content really quickly, capitalizing on the centralization of what we've actually done. In fact, the Espanol library is the second most popular library on our platform today, only behind chemistry, because chemistry is the best field that we should be studying, of course. So these are the 16 independent libraries. Each of these libraries is a wiki. And we chose a wiki technology because it was the best technology for large-scale collaborative construction efforts. We knew we wanted to create an infrastructure in which multiple people can capitalize on what we created and multiple people can contribute to what we created. In fact, the first 5 years of our existence was predominantly undergraduate contributions to the project and moving it forward. In fact, 19 of our top 20 most popular pages are of pages that were created by those students in those initial days. That's out there. So um, the LibreOne account gives you the ability in order to start to create textbooks on each of these libraries. I'll go into the details behind that before. And they're hosted, again, individually off here. And this is meant, to, again, to focus predominantly on the pages associated with textbooks. The other parts of the LibreVerse are reflected up here. And this right here has 7, am I counting it right? 8 different entries right here that are help to provide value added features to the textbooks that are hosted on our libraries. One is the Adapt homework system. This is a technology that was funded by the state of California about 4.5 years ago through the California Education Learning Lab. And it's grown steadily from just initially focusing on general chemistry into a wide range of other topics out there. We have about 300,000 questions that are hosted in the ADAPT homework system. The LibreOne account gives you access to the homework system as a question bank that you're able to use however you see fit, because most of the content is OER. If you want to use it as a homework platform, depending upon where you are, it may require some financial buy-in in order to be able to use for sustainability purposes. Antecedent writing is an infrastructure that helps to facilitate centralized construction efforts, predominantly of documents, although it will be expanded into spreadsheets and PowerPoint-like presentation infrastructure. There's going to be a presentation that Raymond Orning will be discussing antecedent in about 45 minutes. I encourage you to take a look at that. It's a very effective mechanism in order to facilitate centralized editing and construction materials. It's also useful for open pedagogy-based projects. So if you want to use students in order to construct materials that then can ultimately be folded back into your textbook or other places as non-disposable assignments, using the terminology that David Wiley introduced back in 2013. This is a technology in order to facilitate that, and I encourage you to take a look at it. It has other aspects that are particularly important. The Commons and Conductor are technologies focusing on cataloging and project management tool approach. This is the only OER dedicated project management tool to my knowledge out there, and again, you have access to it. Jupyter Notebook System is a infrastructure to facilitate coding and data analysis. This is basically meant in order to advance your textbooks into the future, what I refer to as the textbooks of the future, so that the textbooks of engagement is addressed. I use that, for example, in my physical chemistry class, for quantum mechanics, where I have students interacting with Python code in order to be able to play with what's called particle in the box problems. Project Nova is going to be coming out later on this year. That's our course management system that combines our textbooks with our homework, with ancillary materials and other things into one big package that you can download into your LMS. Project Studio is our H5P infrastructure. That is a technology for making interactives that you can embed into your book, again, to facilitate greater engagement and hence greater learning. And then we have a support center that you can submit questions for people that are moving forward. I'm going to go into each of these things specifically, but it's useful in order to get a big picture of it here. Anytime that you get lost in the LibreVerse, and it's easy to get lost because there's lots of capabilities off here. If you find the little rocket ship right there, you can click on it and it'll go to the launch pad and be a home page for you to be able to navigate and move around for. So if you go to our libraries, and this is just the Geosciences library, if you don't sign in, the bar right here will be gray. If you do sign in, the bar here will be black. And that gives you the ability in order to edit certain pages, depending upon what your permissioning is set up for your account. But when you actually get involved in building things, and I encourage you to capitalize on the Libre One account in order to get your fingers dirty, in a virtual sense, you need this in order to be able to do. So it's the first step in order to make sure that once you've signed in, you can do that. And your name obviously comes on this bar right there. So let's just take a quick look at what a library looks like. Again, like I mentioned, there are 16 libraries out there. The libraries are structured in a similar fashion with some small deviations. But if you go to the top of the library, and this is the humanities library, we have content stored in 3 different categories. We have the campus bookshelves, we have the centralized bookshelves, which we just call bookshelves generally, and then we have learning objects. The campus bookshelves are books that are curated and hosted on an individual campus bookshelf, an area that's dedicated to a specific campus's interests. People can build books and host it right there and move forward. Those books can either be original books that are constructed, or they can be remixes. In other words, capitalizing on the content that we have in our corpus of pages, which is somewhere in the order of about 1.5 million pages of OER content out there. So it's the biggest central repository of OER content available. Centralized bookshelves are bookshelves that we curate as a development team. So when someone has something original, they want to contribute to us, and we are the ones that are handling the curation efforts and bringing it up to date and maintaining it. It's hosted into the central bookshelves. For example, if OpenStax comes out with a new book, we take it, we integrate it into the bookshelves. We go through, update it, make sure the accessibility is appropriate, right? Make sure the standardization is put up right and other things like that. And then we are responsible for curating it. So then when people find mistakes or issues associated with that book, we can come in and fix it right there, because we're the ones who take the responsibility for curating it, in contrast to the bookshelves, the books that are stored in the campus bookshelves, which the campus itself or the authors that are responsible for building that book or remixing that book, they're the ones who take the responsibility for curation. It's important in order to emphasize that we take curation very seriously. It's a central tenet of how we operate. So the buck doesn't stop at just hosting. In fact, anyone in academia understands that it needs to go much further than just publishing. I liken ourselves not just as a repository for content, but as a curatatory, which is the term that only I use out there. But the point is to emphasize that we're actively engaged in maintaining the content, curating it, moving it forward. And when people have mistakes, or sorry, when people identify mistakes or other feedback to us, we then go through in order to be able to update it so that everyone can benefit from that. And that's important because having just copy after copy after copy of incorrect material out there or mistaken material out there doesn't do the community any good. So those are books or collections of pages that are organized, right? Books. Learning objects are where we actually host materials that are separate from books. Oftentimes there are many little repositories like laboratories, wet labs, dry labs, if you're using chemistry, or visualizations or simulations or other things like that. You can think of it as a repository that you can come in and grab and use those learning objects as necessary in order to flesh out your book. whether it's stored in the central bookshelves or the campus bookshelves. And these three categories are the general categories for most of our libraries, with the exception of the language libraries. For example, the Espanol library is focusing on all our libraries as individual components that you can delve into in order to migrate, instead of this campus bookshelf, centralized bookshelf approach for doing things. Again, the point of what we are trying to do here is by centralizing OER content, it provides us the opportunity in order to facilitate curation efforts, updating it, and more importantly, facilitate remixing. So you can come in and say with a couple buttons, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, like you're a kid in a candy store, and then generate a book that you're ready to rock. And the idea is that once it gets big enough, that corpus is big enough, then we're only limited by our imaginations, not by the actual content that's available for us to be able to move forward with them. Um, so this is a centralized bookshelf associated with the humanities library. It's just the top part of it. There's several more sub bookshelves, or actually these are all bookshelves on the centralized bookshelf. So we have our art, composition, dance, things like that. Every library has its own structure. So obviously this would not be the best bookshelf structure for the chemistry library or for the physics library that's out there. And as we evolve and as we get more books and more areas, the bookshelves will start to flesh out a little bit better like that. It's something akin to the librarians going through and having their stacks and where they organize these stacks in different orders that's out there. So if you were to click on one of these things like composition, you'll then see perhaps books. In this case here, you'll see sub bookshelves because we have so many books dealing in composition. We wanted to be able to structure that into several different categories depending upon grammar, introduction, advanced, technical, specialized, or even online writing procedures. As the number of books that we have grows, we start to actually flesh these things out because it's best not to have all the books handling a wide variety of different topics in one general area. So organization is a critical component of how we actually put this thing down. That would be akin to our librarian skills. In that case, they're the only professional librarian that we have here is Jennifer Rogers, who comes in and tells us about what we do wrong when we actually organize these things in various ways. Because almost everything that we view is from a faculty perspective, not from a librarian perspective. So let's introduce, not introduct, the Workbench. So when you actually create books and you use that LibreOne account that you can request, it gives you the ability in order to create a book. You create a book in an area we call the Workbench, and in the Workbench, it's basically offline. You're able to construct everything, and then you request for it to be published, and that book then moves into the bookshelves, whether it's the campus bookshelf or it's a centralized bookshelf. It depends upon how original the book is and where you actually want it to be handled. If you want to connect this to something like the Matrix, this would be the construct in the Matrix films, and this would actually be the Matrix when you actually move in off of here. So this is a critical component in terms of constructing your books. You don't actually go in and start to manipulate the books on the bookshelves themselves. You build it, and then we push it out after review. The process of reviewing, the process of publication involves publishing involves multiple steps, including reviewing for recommendations that we'll give back to individuals because we care about the quality of what we host on our platform. We don't care about actually just making money for hosting the material, but to actually make sure that the corpus is up to speed and has maximal utility. We will run scripts that go over the books in order to be able to help standardize the books. That's both from style, that's also from making sure that as much of the accessibility requirements for modern hosting of material, WCAG 2.1 or higher, is attained. And we may do other editing as necessary, depending upon what was constructed. And if there's more unique interactives or other type of technical things, we'll actually talk about how to make sure that that thing is together. This is all reflected into this curatory aspect that we want to be able to maintain. We want to be able to ensure that what's being created comes up to a certain level for everyone to be able to capitalize. It's not just anyone who throws anything out there and you're ready to rock with that. Once it's actually put in the bookshelves, then the book is public, whereas when it's the book is under in construction in the Workbench, it's not public, it's not meant for public good. At that point, it will then be available not just for seeing it online, but you'll also be able to see it. You see other export options, including the PDF. We'll have an EPUB soon. We'll have a few other export options soon off of there. And one option that's particularly useful, it's actually not on this slide, it was on here before, is a textbook, our bookstore, so you can actually get a physical copy of the book. So we basically work as an intermediary to take your book and put it into Lulu printing service to generate a physical copy and send it to you. In fact, I recommend that as one of the final steps in construction of a book, because what you see on a physical page is oftentimes very different than what you see online in a virtual page. And I don't understand the psychology behind that, but I do know that it's very different and it's worthwhile in order to see. So I'm going to skip over this thing and talk about a few things associated with authoring a book on the library before transitioning to the other part of the LibreVerse. Uh, so there are there are various questions that one can ask in regards to building the book. Like, for example, what do we have already out there? So if you go to that Libre One, or more specifically, if you go to that launch pad and you click on the Commons, it acts as a cataloging system. And I'll show it to you in a moment. It gives you the ability in order to peruse all the published books. It doesn't give you the content that's stored in the learning objects. That right there, you have to search through the library itself, but it does give you the idea of what's published in the book that you're, and you can go through and say what's available ready for you to be able to either use or adopt for your course if you're happy with it, or to remix and edit as necessary. I don't know any faculty member that's 100% happy with their book. There's always a desire in order to add something or to delete something, and that's what we're actually here for. It's not one size fits all. Um, but there's also OER that's outside of our platform. We're going through lots of effort in order to internalize it, subject to all the review processes that we're going by doing it. But in terms of bringing things in, we have the process of what we call harvesting, which is our term for integration, standardizing content, applying accessibility. And as I'll mention a little bit later on, using some AI and help facilitate meta tagging and alt text and summaries that for bringing books up to the level that we want books to be off of there. The Conductor infrastructure is meant as a project management tool to help facilitate people building books or projects that are facilitating multiple books, oftentimes if they are a large campus or even multi-campus organizations. The Conductor is your friend in order to keep track of that, in addition to facilitating communication and such like that. So let's just talk about the Commons. So as I mentioned, the Commons is available on the Launchpad. So you click on the little Launchpad, the little rocket ship here in the upper left-hand corner. It will get to it. This right here is a snapshot of the Commons. It changes every time you look at it in terms of which books are available on the front screen, but you always have the ability in order to do a search right here in order to catalog and find these sort of things. So you can come in and say, I want to know about algebra, and it'll give you the 50 or so books dealing with algebra from a wide variety of things. So you can go through, peruse it, and it's all standardized and it's all consistent here in order to facilitate, again, remixing. And there's a link if you want to actually take a look at it directly that's out here. Every book that's actually published has a Conductor or Commons page. This right here is a Commons page for an introductory nutrition book from Kansas State University. And this is just the top part of the Commons page, which gives some of the information that you need in order to evaluate the page, including a table of contents summary. It also will go through the licensing that you have that's associated with the actual content itself. This is the bottom of the page where you have the export options for that specific resource. You can also submit peer reviews. As an instructor, you can actually keep track of the peer reviews. You can keep track of adoption reports. And if you click on the Conductor project, if you see that, and if you're not logged in, you're not going to see that. If you don't have a Libre One account, and then you can go to the Conductor page, which is the back project organization. This is something a little bit more unique, and I don't have time in order to talk about licensing, but we keep track of licensing on every page. And we use that as a mechanism to show you what are the applicable licenses for that book. The argument behind there is that you may have a book that has a range of different licenses. It's important in order to know what those licenses are, and more importantly, what the restriction might be for that entire book based on the licenses that are out there. This is far more complete and comprehensive than any other project out there that focuses on hosting of OER content and such. So um, this is the bookstore that I alluded to a few minutes ago. So when the book is actually published, we have a range of export options. And like I mentioned, you have the ability in order to purchase the textbook. This is the purchasing aspect. Again, most of the cost associated with this is the printer costs or the shipping costs. We have a little bit of cost for handling administration in order to make sure that we can keep the servers up in order to be able to ensure that people have access to it. But this is way below cost. We're actually taking a hit for that, but that's because we care about mission over money for the way we go about doing these things. And we have a range of different bookstores and even campuses that focus on incarcerated student education and other things that use these bookstores quite aggressively. Okay, so I presume most, if not all of us, have some familiarity what OER is out there as open educational resources, what the basic principle of OER is predicated on open licensing. Again, I mentioned I wasn't going to be going into detail behind open licensing, but every page has an indication of its license, and it's typically right underneath the title here, which gives you the license. If you click on it, it will go to the link associated with this. So this is CC BY, share alike, non-commercial, share alike. Click on this, it'll go to the deed that you're able to read that appropriate one with the appropriate version that's connected to it. So licensing each of the pages is particularly important for the way that we operate. We have an auto attribution system that I don't have a picture of here that gives you the ability that when you remix content from one part of our platform to another part, it keeps the attribution and the licensing components with that content. So you're ensured that you'll be compliant with open licensing, which is actually exceedingly important because the vast majority of OER that I see out there, it's oftentimes very poorly put together in terms of licensing for a variety of reasons. And that's because Creative Commons licensing especially, for it to be powerful, means it has a bit of complexity. And most of us, if not all of us here, have very little professional experience in copyright law. At least certainly I did not as a chemist. So nonetheless, when you actually click on one of the books that's in this general chemistry bookshelf, it will open up the book in the library. This is the book that we have here. You have access to the table of contents that you're able to parse through the book if you want. It gives you the ability in order to showcase all the materials that we have here. There are a range of different mechanisms that we have used and facilitated over the years in terms of building books in our library. So the one that many people are familiar with, which is essentially mechanism number 4 here, which is us taking content that already is created somewhere else. I use the example of OpenStax out there, and us bringing it in. Now, that's via the process of harvesting. It's typically done by faculty or by developers on our team that goes through and processes and edits it and converts everything down, dissects it out, and tries to deal with the diversity associated with different content, because the nature of the structure of books that are on OpenStax may be different from Pressbooks or maybe different from GitHub or LaTeX or anything like that. We go through all the pain of integrating that so that you don't have to. Because anyone who's ever tried to copy and paste from a PDF into a Word document and sees lots of junk, we go through that stuff so you don't actually have to see all that garbled stuff, making it easier in order to facilitate. But that's just one of several mechanisms that one can choose from as a user of the LibreVerse. I mentioned that the LibreTexts itself was a student constructed project. It was an open pedagogy based project using today's vernacular. I'm not sure if that term existed back then when we started. I certainly didn't know about it, but the idea behind that was to use as part of assignments or extra credit in my classes the opportunity for students to construct content. Now that was useful for a pedagogical purpose because I was obviously connected to trying to make sure that students were learning from what we were doing, but it was useful because they were creating non-disposable assignments, material in order to capitalize on and move forward with that. That right there is a time-consuming process. It could be facilitated by going through several different mechanisms, including a review process and moving things forward. That's actually integrated into that antecedent technology that will be discussed in a half hour from now in our sequence of events. And I encourage those of you that are interested in open pedagogy to take a look at it, because it's really not any open pedagogy tool out there for people to capitalize on, despite all the conversations around how great open pedagogy is. And we wanted to be able to facilitate that, especially for large classes. We've used students in order to help facilitate harvesting of existing content. In addition to the faculty stuff, we have faculty construct content from scratch or from their notes that they've collected over a period of time, or that they've contributed content that they've already had published that they want to be able to move forward with that. And then ultimately, everything needs to be curated, updated, and constantly be replenished, because again, we're a curatatory, not just a repository. It's a critical aspect of defining who we are. So which mechanisms work best for you in terms of building a textbook depends upon where you want to go, what resources you have available, and where you actually, not just resources, but what person power you have, whether they're students or support from campus in order to be able to facilitate, in order to be able to move it forward. So I mentioned harvesting before. We have a harvesting team that's run by Priti. Priti is our director of harvesting and integration. She's been with us for about a decade, and she's been responsible for bringing in a significant number of books, of probably 600 books over the last decade. We have multiple workflows in order to facilitate integrating of existing materials, whether it's from scratch or a website, a PDF, Word, Google Doc, Common Cartridge, LaTeX, Pressbooks, Lumen, EPUB, XML, Pretext, and other things. There's a range of different workflows because each of these formats has their own unique structure off of them, and they're not designed in order to interconvert very conveniently, unfortunately. And I'm not sure if it ever would be convenient in order to be able to move forward off of that. If you have content that you want to have harvested, and so if you identify a specific OER that you want to be able to use within our platform, you can submit a request to Priti via our harvesting request form, which can be viewed in harvest request, Commons LibreTexts or harvest, but basically www. Not www, sorry, https harvest.libretext.org. And that I'll paste into the chat, which is a direct URL, in order to give you access to being able to pop that. That's if you have your own content that you want to contribute. That's if you have content that you want to remix from for making a book that we don't have within our platform after you do a search through these things. And Pretty is very diligent in order to be able to go through with that. The team is kind of small right now. We were planning on expanding that, both from state and federal funds, but as anyone who's paying attention to what's going on, both in the state of California and also at the federal level, things are a little dicey these days regarding that. But nonetheless, we have a team in order to be able to move that. And that's necessary in order to make it so you can move forward in building or adopting OER in our platform. Please take advantage of it. So, so we're sitting on about 1.5 million pages of OER content in a variety of different libraries and different formats and things like that. That's great, right? It's the biggest central corpus of OER content available for people to capitalize on. But we constructed something in order to be able to facilitate easy remixing of that. And this was released about 7 years ago, which is called the Remixer. And the Remixer is a simplified tool that you can tap into on your Conductor page, where you're actually using in order to organize your book, that you can click on in order to be able to make a simple drag and drop. So you can have the rest of the corpus out here, which has the 1.5 million pages. You have your book on the right-hand side, and then you just drag and drop chapters and pages to meet what you want, and you save and you're ready to go. Now, when we do these things at conferences, we oftentimes have people sit down and say they have a vision for a book. We then build their book within 10 minutes. They're able to rock. They walk out the door and they're able to use it immediately. That's out there. This makes remixing I wouldn't call it enjoyable, but it makes remixing easy. And that's the key point, is in order to remove the barrier so that faculty can actually build the books that they want, and not just have to accept the books that are given to them. And that's what open licensing does with remixing. That's there. Uh, we go through conversations of remixing multiple times. We have a section in our the rest of this week dedicated exclusively to remixing. I encourage you to take a look at the schedule. Hopefully Jennifer can paste the schedule into the chat here, where we'll go into a lot more detail associated with remixing and such like that. But it's exceedingly powerful, and I encourage you to capitalize on that. So going back to the Conductor page, so I introduced the comments. The Conductor, again, is this project management tool. And we knew that we needed a project management tool because we were organizing lots of projects. Just internally, we wanted to be able to keep track of these things. However, as LibreOne members, or so as LibreOne account holders, you have the ability in order to be able to use this in order to create your book. In fact, you can't create a remix without creating a Conductor page first for that. So if you click on the Conductor button on the Launchpad, it'll open up the Conductor back page. If you create a book, this right here is a book for business communications for success, and it has a handful of data behind it. It's meant in order to be essential infrastructure to facilitate storage of content associated with this for the construction of this material, storage of curation effort, or even ancillary materials or organization off of there. There's a topic, I think actually it was discussed the hour before here by Justin that went through this, or Common Conductor. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not up on the full schedule because, again, we have over 20 different presentations. So I may have missed it here. In the chat, but nonetheless, it is an effective tool in order to facilitate not just construction, but a handful of other things, including peer review, helping to maintain accessibility, monitor accessibility, and the AI co-authoring tool, which I'll talk about in more detail later on this week on Friday, our first Features Friday. But I'm happy in order to talk about some of the things here because it's really cool. And it's meant in order to help facilitate moving OER up to a higher standard on our platform. So I should mention that we have a construction guide. Our construction guide, actually don't have the link here. Actually, the link is under our Academy, under faculty resources. And it is a general how-to guide in order to use the LibreVerse. And it's not a bad idea when you're getting involved and you're going to be committed in order to move forward to go get a copy of that. It costs about $10 plus shipping in order to be able to work on it. It's really useful in order to have a physical copy in order to move forward. At the same point, I should mention Academy, although that's not technically part of the LibreVerse, it's part of the gamut of resources that we provide. And this is our professional development arm. We use this the Academy in order to handle both the organization of Open Ed Week, our LibreFest, which is our summer week-long professional development training, or Oktoberfest, which is our October typically a session typically right before Open Ed conference for people to capitalize on and move forward. And if you have an interest in order to get professional development to master the LibreVerse, this is one way in order to go about doing it. Although there are lots of videos and other materials in order to do it at your leisure via independent. Sometimes you may want to have directed assistance for moving things forward, and the Academy is there in order to be able to move that. And Justin Shorb, who's also here, runs that arm for us. This is the construction guide. Again, the second edition, and this is just a snapshot of the top 7 of the chapters there in order to be able to move forward with different aspects, although we do have 16 different chapters focusing on different aspects of the LibreVerse, depending on what part of the LibreVerse you want to be able to use. At this point, I should also mention one thing, in that the LibreVerse can be very daunting. I gave you this Launchpad. It has lots of applications, lots of libraries. It's really easy to get lost into this morass of other things that, or all the LibreVerse provides. The key point that I would try to emphasize is not necessary to master everything in the LibreVerse. You only need to be competent in the things that are important for you. So if you don't need Jupyter as an infrastructure to facilitate data analysis, then don't worry about that. Or if you're not making H5P assessments, then don't worry about Studio or any of the other libraries that may be outside of your specific field that you want to be able to focus on it. So just feel just focus on the small things that are important for moving things forward, and don't get stuck in the bigger picture of everything. But again, if you do want to review all that stuff, the construction guide is there for you. We also run office hours Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9 to 10 o'clock Pacific time at zoom.libretext.org. And I'm going to presume that Jennifer or Justin can paste that link into the chat here, so you'll have access to that, and we'll provide free help with anyone who wants to be able to use the LibreVerse and such. So this is just some of the aspects associated with the construction guide, dealing with different aspects that we will be focusing on. We have no discussion around textbook design, although that is particularly important in order to make sure that you organize things in a constructive pedagogical fashion. In fact, that's actually what Justin got his PhD in, focusing on that. But if you want to be able to focus on any of the other things, including Conductor, Commons, Remixing, such like that, you can find those entries right there. We do have a series of webinars, one per month, dealing with basic principles of these things. And there should be a link that might be included also in the chat in order to be able to address that. When you get your own LibreOne account, you'll be put onto our mailing list, and you'll be kept abreast of all the trainings that we provide for the community that's out there. So let me talk about something that I think is really cool. And that right there is the co-authoring tools. Everyone who's not everyone who's paying attention, and even those that are not paying attention to academia, can see that there's a significant shift going on with AI. And we're obviously watching that too. We want to be able to figure out how to use AI constructively, and more importantly, how to avoid using AI in a destructive manner. And that's going to be, again, part of the discussion that Raymond is going to be talking about in about 15 minutes. We will have introduced into the Conductor some AI tools that AI is useful for doing. So I'm comfortable with using AI to help build or help to address the things that are oftentimes missed or ignored in OER out there. For example, making summaries of pages, identifying the meta tags on the page, what keywords those pages are addressed to, or making alt text for images that are on the page for accessibility purposes. So somewhere between 70% or 80% of OER out there, and even the OER that we are sitting on that we've harvested into the platform, oftentimes doesn't have those three things. And it's a critical component because for example, the keywords, we use those things in order to construct an index for the book. No one has a great desire to make an index for a book after they've actually created the book, because it's just not a pleasant experience. Let's use AI in order to facilitate that. And I'm actually quite comfortable using AI for doing that. I don't think there are any real ethical issues associated with that, in contrast to other uses of AI. And we've implemented what we call the co-authoring tools, or just the co-author, which is available on the Conductor page, in this pink co-authoring tool. If you click on it, we'll introduce Benny. Benny is our mascot. That will start to introduce this AI wand that you use in order to be able to help facilitate the construction of page summaries, meta tags, or alt text on the images. So in other words, once we actually run these over our 1.5 million pages of content, there'll be no images on our platform that don't have alt text. Every book will have an index that you're able to use constructively. Every book will have summaries for every page that's on there. We'll then be able to extend this to glossaries for every book, learning objects for every book. In other words, take it so that you can make your book and move it to the top, to the next level of what OER needs to be, because OER is focusing, or at least in my opinion, should be focusing on quantity and quality in our development of textbooks. And this is one way in order to facilitate this. And I think this is really cool. And I encourage you to take a look at. This is a snippet of making a summary of a specific book or specific page. This is electron pairs and octets. We could bring it in, and more importantly, we have the ability to edit it. So we don't have to believe 100% of what the OER what the AI generated resources. We can update it. The same thing happens with meta tags. When we actually get meta tags, we can come in and curate it, because we always need some subject master review in order to tweak things up, in order to make sure that what's generated is actually productive and not just AI crap. I think that might be the technical term that's associated with that. Okay, so that was a general over the libraries, a few additional things off of here. I just want to focus on these last things in the last 5 to 7 minutes of here. You'll be able to peruse them at your leisure when you access the Launchpad. There are a range of different services that are connected to here. I want to skip over that and just go to the straightforward point. Actually, Adapt is our homework infrastructure. It contains about 300,000 questions. Most of them are STEM based, although the most popular field in Adapt is Spanish as a second language. And we're constantly expanding it with new technologies, including virtual dissection capabilities, better organic chemistry capabilities, economics, interactives, and other things that are connected to it. I encourage you to capitalize on the Libre One account and feel free to peruse the Adapt infrastructure. The worst case scenario, if you don't like it as a homework system, it's a question bank. And I don't know any faculty member that says, no, I don't want to have access to more questions off of that. Students who get Libre One accounts, because we manually verify, don't get access to the question banks because that would undermine the whole point of using it as a question bank. So that's what Adapt is set up there. It's able to connect to your learning management system, pass grades back. We have other aspects that are connected to it, including learning trees, which is our adaptive learning infrastructure. In addition to a conventional way of giving questions and asking for questions response. One key component of that is our new Discuss It-based questions, which gives the ability for peer review and peer interactions. And that right there is going to be discussed later on this week by Christina Moon for Spanish in order to get students to interact with each other with this infrastructure. It resembles Flipgrid, for example, that's out there. This is a learning tree. I'm going to shoot by these things with relatively quick pictures. Jupyter Notebook System gives you the ability to embed into your book interactive code. This is Python code that's interacted with the book. Again, the point is that students interact more with it, and then from interacting more with it, they're more likely to learn. There are 30 different languages that you can use in Jupyter in order to be able to advance these things. Studio is our repository for H5P. That's a specific type of technology that you can use in order to generate interactives that you can build in your book. You can use it summatively through Adapt. You can use it formatively directly into your book so that students can actually interact with it without having to sign in. It makes really beautiful visualizations in order to interact with, but those visualizations are oftentimes have issues with accessibility. And I'm happy in order to talk about that and how we address that within the Adapt homework system. Antecedent will be discussed in 10 minutes by Raymond here. And I mentioned already, it gives you the ability in order to have students write their writing assignments. In this case here, this is a lab. My TAs can come in and write comments associated with the labs and evaluate them and use this as a centralized mechanism. So we could truly go into a paperless society, but more importantly, do it in an LMS agnostic way so that the people who are in one LMS can share these exercises with other LMS. It also comes with some advanced analytics in order to help identify the construction infrastructure, in order to guide if the students are constructing appropriately. This is from a composition perspective, but also helps you to facilitate if someone's doing large-scale copying, pasting. For example, if ChatGPT or some other AI tool gives the answer, they can identify if they actually copied and pasted it directly. So I'm going to skip over some of these other aspects and then just end with what I mentioned before. The LibreVerse is a multifaceted infrastructure designed in order to take the place of commercial publishers in the classroom. Because commercial publishers have a wide range of resources and platforms that they have incorporated, built, or purchased, we are doing something similar so that you can actually come in and once you get access to the LibreVerse, you can actually use it in a broad range of things, not just to host books and to distribute those books, but to actually provide all the value added components for your pedagogy in the classroom. And that's the reason why it's as expansive as it is. And that's out there. We're very excited with what it's able to do. We're very excited with the impact that we've had so far. We're excited if you capitalize on the account that we have in there. And with that, in the last 8 minutes or so of this presentation, I'm happy in order to address some questions or concerns that are out.